Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, enemies to lovers, fake dating. There's only one bed. Where are we going to sleep? If you're an avid romance reader, you recognize all the common tropes. But finding a story that doesn't just include an LGBTQ plus character, but centers those stories isn't always that easy. If you're looking for literary love and want to see your queer identity on the page too, well, we have got the perfect book club for you. It's Monday, October 30th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh is talking about. I'm with the co-founders of the Not Gal Pals Book Club, Mary Lee Williams, hello.
Hi.
And Natalie DeLuba. Welcome to CityCast Pittsburgh.
Hi, thank you.
How did you each get into romance novels? Mary Lee, you want to go first?
I used to read romance occasionally, but I kind of had gotten into this, I don't want to call it a trap, but I feel like it's a mindset about reading where you think that you only need to be reading things that educate you or take you farther in some way. But the fact is that when I started reading more romance, it changed how I looked at reading, which is reading is just something I can do to enjoy myself. And the second I started thinking about reading in that way, it really opened up the genres that I would allow myself to read and the types of books I would allow myself to read. Mm-hmm. So during the pandemic, Natalie and I started hanging out because I talked about how much I enjoy reading, and it kind of became something I really picked up a lot during the pandemic. And Natalie is a voracious reader. And so she started recommending romance books to me. So Natalie and I would meet up
in Arsenal Park, because we both lived in Lawrenceville.
Yeah, and we would sit on a blanket and for hours talk about books. I mean, like 3-4 plus hours.
I think one day was like 6.
Yeah, like what else were we doing? And so Natalie would bring me books. I would read the books. We would talk about the books. And we did that through the entire shutdown, basically. And so that's kind of how I got started, was really through Natalie's recommendations.
Yeah. When did you take this shared love of romance novels and kind of stepping outside of a very messy world public? When did you start inviting people to your picnic blanket?
So we had been playing with the idea for a while. We're we should do a book club. This is so fun. And then one time she came over to one of the places I was house sitting at, and we were just talking about it. And we were yeah, we should really do it. And then she just merely pulled out her phone. She's all right, we're going to do it right now. And
that sounds right for you, Mary.
And so I had never heard of this app, but is Meetup. Mm-hmm. And she's well, just pay for we found out that you had to pay in order to host a group. And then she's
eye rolls over here.
Yeah. And then she's well, whatever. We'll just do it for 6 months. And if it doesn't, if it's nothing, then we just lost what was $60. Anyway, so we met at Trace Brewing, and 10 people showed up.
That's great.
Yeah, and we were oh my God. It was really nice. Our first one was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, because we wanted to do a book that was approachable, both in terms of availability at the library.
Yeah, because y'all have very specific criteria for what can be chosen as a book club book, right?
Yeah. And to even step back a little bit, we had started just doing regular romance, the whole broad genre. And when we decided that we wanted to make the book club, we wanted to do a niche because Natalie reads a lot of queer romance. I was kind of being introduced to the genre, and we decided that we were both really interested in it and kind of enjoyed reading and talking about it so much. So when we made the book club, we decided that we were going to do all queer romance, but queer in the full spectrum of it.
Yeah. So how do you pick the books? And is it specifically y'all every time, or do other people weigh in?
So it's evolved.
It has evolved.
When we first started, it was Mary Lee and I would choose 3 books and then kind of pose that to whoever showed up to the most recent book club, and then they would choose between the 3 books that we had selected. And the criteria is it has to be romance, which means that there has to be a happily ever after. We're not here for Nicholas Sparks,
No
stuff.
sad
No sad stuff.
terminal illnesses.
Although, like, they can, like, characters in romance can experience sad and traumatic things, but the comfort of the genre is that happily ever after. And I'm, like, very serious about not calling something that doesn't happen happily ever after like a romance. I'm like, it's not a romance.
No, I love strong opinions. Keep going.
And then also that the characters have to have a queer identity in some way. It can be like a straight passing relationship if one of the characters has a queer identity of some sort. And that can be whether it's sexuality or gender identity. And also, like, we want to try to make an effort for the authors themselves maybe to have some type of queer identity, although we're not as strict about that. Also, sometimes it's kind of hard to know. Some authors are more open about their own identities, and some aren't.
And it's evolving, of course. An author may have identified one way when they wrote the book in a different way.
Yeah,
now.
like Becky Albertari, who wrote Love, Simon, was, like, kind of forced to come out as, like, a bisexual woman because of all the... Casey McQuiston had to come out as non-binary, too, through all, like, the weird criticism of writing, like, a book about queer people.
The other thing that's really important about the books is that we try very, very hard to make sure the books are available at the library or are affordable, because that is one thing that we really value, is that we want the book club to be approachable to everybody. And a lot of times when you're in a book club, and I found this when I've tried to join other book clubs, there's a cost barrier.
Yeah, a lot of, especially if you want to read something that's spicier, so where, like, the sexual content is higher or more prevalent, those are less likely to be traditionally published, and those will be, like, independently published by the authors themselves. And so we try to kind of spread those out a little bit, where if we're asking somebody to spend, like, $3.99 on an ebook or $4.99 or whatever, that's only once or twice a year. Also, I tend to own the books that we were talking about, so I always, like, at least have a copy that we can loan out to people if that's something that they need or want. So, yeah, like, but now it's talking about it's evolving. So people wanted more input on what we were choosing. And we've tried a couple things like a Google Doc where people put in some suggestions, and that was, like, middling successful. So now we're doing these things called book caucuses where
we sounds right for two journalists.
Yeah, we wanted to bring the politics into this, so we make people caucus for their choices.
Yeah, so we had, like, a separate meeting, like a non-book club meeting where we're just be like, hey, bring a suggestion and we're going to pitch it, and then we're going to choose, like, the next 3 months worth of books.
I like that, yeah.
So then people have more time to, like, wait for it to come available at the library, or just so they know ahead of time instead of just like, oh, I find out today and I have, like, 3 weeks now to read it.
And is it a book every month or every couple?
Yes, we do a book every month, except we do have an exception. We usually combine November and December because so many people are traveling for the holidays that we just didn't see it as reasonable to be able to, like, make that one work. And it never worked for our schedules either. So.
Yeah. So we do, like, a early December to cover both November and December.
Well, a lot of romance novels have spice levels, but they can vary widely. Is there, like, a range that y'all aim for? And do you give any, like, content warnings, or do you just assume people know what they're in for?
So we definitely, when we started doing the book caucuses, I definitely think our content warnings became more explicit, because when we asked people to bring books to suggest to read, we want to be mindful that in the romance genre, there can be a lot of, trigger warnings. There can be things that happen that make people uncomfortable to read that might be difficult. And some of them are even, like, tropes. Like, for example, one that we try to be really careful of is age gap romances. Those can be really difficult for some people to read. So we do like to give trigger warnings if we can. In terms of,
like, spice level,
we follow the 1 to 5 chili pepper range, I think.
Yeah, but we're not an emoji rating system.
Yeah, we're not, like, tied. It's not like there's not, like, a requirement of spice level in order for the book to be recommended. But what we try to do is, this is true for, like, the sub genres of romance, is to have, like, a variety.
I'm going to be honest, I told y'all this in advance. None of the current city cast teammates are big romance readers historically, but we've also kind of mutually talked, and we're kind of struggling to read anything right now. I think some of it's just the fire hose of news and reading professionally, but also, like, I think our genres that we've historically picked are just weighing us down. So we're all open to suggestions right now. Maybe a reset is in order. We were hoping you might be able to give us some recommendations. Are y'all game?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to say whose genre is who, but you're welcome to guess. First up, some element of sci-fi or magic. What would you recommend?
For this one, I'm actually going to go back to one of the books that we read in our book club that was, I think, around Halloweenish time, maybe. We read Cemetery Boys. That was a really amazing book for a lot of reasons. There's trans rap in it, and there's a lot of magic. There's mystery. There's romance. Like, it's a really amazing book.
A hot ghost, you know.
A super hot ghost.
It is YA, so like
taking us back to our Casper days.
Yeah, I mean,
a little bit, honestly.
but like, it's a beautiful book. It really hits you in your feels. There's a lot of wonderful magic in it, and there's mystery. It was a really fun book. I don't know what you suggested.
It's called The Darkness Outside Us. I think it deserves more credit than it gets. It's like kind of marketed as a YA sci-fi romance, which it technically is, but it's way more. It's like almost like kind of like a sci-fi thriller at times, and it's like in the future, and these two young men are put on a spaceship to Jupiter, and they have to kind of work together to keep their spaceship running, and then kind of like the mystery of their mission and like the truth of it. But it's like it's like romance, but it's also about like, I don't know, the contemplation of like what makes life worth living. It was really good, and I was not expecting it at all, but I like tore through it. So I think that's like a really great sci-fi and like a thinker too.
I like that. Okay. Moving on to number 2, history, with something that builds on like real events or plausible experiences.
The Care and Feeding of Waspish Widows by Olivia Waite. It was also an NPR recommended book, so it's very good. It's sapphic. It's fun. I liked it.
Natalie, anything different?
Mostly it's like if you're reading historical romance and the author does a really good research, it's going to feel like the real life historical events are like integral to the story. And my favorite top tier historical romance writer is KJ Charles. She's like, all of her stuff is so amazing. Pick up anything by KJ.
Yeah. An author rec. I love it. Something really narrative focused, like just great writing, preferably with a strong femme presenting voice.
We agreed on this one.
Yes, we did.
Ooh, consensus.
This is the book we would recommend. Highly recommend. Highly recommend. It's called You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. It's an amazing book. Everyone should read it. It's so beautiful.
It's so lush.
It's so lush.
Yeah. We read it last summer, I think. Oh my God. It blew me away.
You both are like gasping a little bit. So.
It's really
We'll let people Google that one for themselves. Something with a really good but still believable villain, like just high drama.
This one is hard.
This one is really hard because you could take this very literally, and which I did. If you're looking for high spice and villains, very in the traditional sense, the Wicked Villains series by Katie Robert is where Disney villains are recast as the main character and love interest in these like very spicy romances. So Jafar, the Beast, Hook, they're just, they're
Ursula.
set. Ursula, yeah. They're really great books, very, in taking it very seriously, a literal Disney villain.
Disney villain. Okay. So you've got a meeting coming up in December. If folks want to get involved, want to start reading, want to at least have it on their radar, how do they get in touch?
Well, so we have a meetup. Our name is the Not Gal Pals Book Club. We are friends, though. Don't think that we are not nice. We're very nice. It's a joke title. But you can find us on Instagram. We have the Not Gal Pals Book Club on Instagram, where you can find some of our stuff. You can also find us on Meetup. And yeah.
But it doesn't mean that only like women or femme presenting people can come to the club. Like just as long as you're respectful of the space and you want to hear about romance, especially queer romance, like it's welcome to like all people.
Wonderful. Natalie, Mary Lee, thank you so much for sharing your book club with us.
Thank you for asking us about it.
Yes, I love to talk about romance.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. And a little personnel news. If you like what you heard today, you are in luck because one of our guests, Mary Lee Williams, is actually joining the CityCast podcast team for the next few months. We are so stoked to have her, and we can't wait for you to hear her knowledge and talents repped here on and off the mic. Okay, Yins, make sure you're subscribed to our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye. If you were going to write a love story for Here in the City, what would it be like? Where's the meet cute? Where's the extremely Pittsburgh drama that would threaten the relationship? And where would they, of course, have a big romantic reconciliation?
I mean, you could pick any restaurant, but I feel like Penn Avenue in Bloomfield is like a really good place to have like a third act conflict.
Okay.
Like you step out of any restaurant and there's like cars going by and murals. I feel like that would be a really fun place. And then a reconciliation. I mean, this is just me personally. I do it at Apteca.
You're like, that's my happy space.
Just for the snacks.
Just because
so it's like a good meal after it.
Yeah.
In the waiting line for 5 p.m.
Yeah.
You're the
actually, yeah. The reconciliation happens in the line to get into Apteca very specifically, and then you have a meal after.
Perfect.